Welcome back to the PreVetted podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Our guest today is Yash Chaturvedi. He's head of product for live sports ads at Amazon. Yash has built his career at the intersection of AI, computer vision, and product management, leading teams that transform how audiences experience digital products. He's also an inventor with multiple US patents, advancing how machine learning powers personalization and engagement. From scaling CV/ML products to defining frameworks for PM success, Yash brings a rare mix of deep technical insights and visionary product leadership. Yash, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Federico. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Um, so, can you share us your story of how you transitioned into product leadership at Amazon?
Sure. So I've been a product manager in the product management space for about 12 years now, 12, 13 years. And I started off my product management career back in 2014 with Staples. The hiring manager at Staples, I asked him one time, like, hey, why did you hire me? So he was like, hey, I was looking for someone cheap because he didn't have enough budget. So he was looking to hire someone coming in from a tier B school and was driven. So I kind of stood out, and apparently I was cheap back then for him to afford. So that's how I got into product management, to be honest. But for the last 8, 9 years, I've been in kind of the e-commerce space before I came into Prime Video. And I'll talk about my journey within Prime Video. But my experience goes from search, recommendation, personalization of e-commerce website. I've been with 3 Fortune companies so far, Fortune 500 companies. And my expertise lies in kind of marrying the machine learning aspect of technology with kind of business problems and customer problems that the company is trying to solve. I have a deep technical background with my engineering, my bachelor's in computer science engineering, and with my master's in data science. So I understand. I always tell this to my engineering team. I can know when my engineers are kind of fluffing up their level of effort for any of the things that they're kind of quoting me as part of the sprint planning. They are always kind of cautious when it comes to scoping stuff for me because I can kind of catch them and tell them like, hey, when they're kind of overestimating.
You know firsthand how much time things are going to take. So you
Correct.
know when somebody's giving you false information.
So like my engineers are always careful. But so I got into Amazon within the Amazon Prime Video space. They were looking to hire and kind of build a product team around trust and safety, which is kind of lies under the umbrella of compliance. So imagine Prime Video streams in about 200 territories. Every territory has its own rules and regulations. So you have to make sure titles that are getting streamed or movie series that are getting streamed in those location or territories are compliant with the local rules and regulations. And back then when I joined, a bunch of stuff was still done very manually. We had operators in various countries that we had hired. They were reviewing these titles manually and kind of saying, okay, like, hey, this matches this particular standard operating procedure of this country. So it was kind of, and we had millions of titles. So like a lot of titles were not meeting compliance. So like, that's why they kind of hired me to see, okay, how can we kind of bring in some machine learning into the mix to identify what's going on in the scene and this is where the whole birth of long form video understanding came in, where I came in and kind of understood what the team was doing and how we needed to solve this at scale. So that's where I came up with this idea of like long form scene understanding, where how can you understand what's going on in a scene, in a frame, in the entire title, and kind of formulate the description about that title, about that frame, about that scene, which gave birth to maturity rating on Prime Video and content descriptors on Prime Video. So now every time you go to a detail page on Prime Video, you see, hey, whether this title is rated R, PG. And also as soon as you play the title, you see whether this contains nudity, violence, smoking scenes and whatnot. So that kind of came as part of those long form video understanding platform that kind of came out of my first year within Prime Video. And as part of that, I also invented a bunch of new technology or new customer experiences within Prime Video that did not exist before. And I have very interesting stories, which I know we'll kind of dive deep later on. But that kind of invented the whole, as long as I can understand what's going on the scene, I can also monetize and say, hey, like, okay, if there's an empty space on a table, can I put a Coca-Cola can on the table and monetize and go to Coke and say, okay, hey, millions of customers are going to see this. Are you willing to partner with us and sponsor this particular scene? So that kind of gave part for virtual product placement, which is one of my biggest accomplishments in my professional career. And then for the last 1.5 years, I've been focused more on the live events in sports monetization. So how can we think about if you're watching Thursday Night Football or NBA on Prime Video, how can I monetize the viewership? Because apparently 30 to 40% of the sports content in general is advertising, ad break focus. So my kind of charter is to figure out how do we make it more customer centric, customer focused, rather than giving them interruptive breaks in the middle. How can we make much more streamlined ad customer experiences for viewers on Prime Video?
So now you're able to do product placement with live fits.
Yes, we can. We don't call them as product placement because what we do is we do brand placements on the field. So a lot of times you'll see sports, soccer, cricket, and you see these brand logos being augmented on the field. And those are traditionally were kind of painted on the field, but now the tech has come to a place where we can do them virtually. And there are a lot of third-party companies, and like Amazon also has its own homegrown solution that kind of helps us do this.
And with that, they can personalize the fit for different countries, right? They can change yeah. I've seen those. Basically, they are where the ads used to be. Now they have a placeholder, and you basically can, on the video, replace at that placeholder.
Correct. And like there are targeting parameters based on like which advertiser wants to target what kind of audience and whatnot.
Right. Right. Yeah. It used to be like two sides, right? So you could do like, if you film from one side of the field or the other side of the field, then
Right.
you'd have two different brands, right? Two different configuration, if you like, right? I don't know the jargon, so.
Yeah. So that's what I've been up to these days and kind of my journey within Amazon.
Right. Amazing. And what initially drew you into computer vision and machine learning products?
So my love for computer vision started back in 2014 when um, at Staples, we were trying to figure out how do we scan invoices. And that's where I was introduced to some of the OCI techniques. So essentially, it's kind of asking computers to detect patterns. I kind of give this example where imagine I have two kids, 8 and 3. So I have to teach them every aspect of like, hey, whether this color is red versus yellow as they're kind of in the very younger age. So it's similar with kind of introducing these patterns and these kind of notion to the machine. So that has been always exciting of like, how do you train certain models, computer essentially like to detect certain patterns, certain colors, so that's where kind of I've been fascinated with machine learning and computer vision since 2014. But now, and because of some limited computations back in the day, but we live in a very different era in the last like 1 to 2 years. A lot of things have changed. Compute power has kind of drastically improved. Introduction of LLMs, generative AI coming into the mix. So there has been a big leap in terms of where the technology was back when I started versus like where we are today. So like in the last 10, 11 years, a lot of things have changed.
Right. Yes, a lot. So what skills do you think set apart a great PM working in AI from the rest?
So recently I gave a talk on this topic in one of the AI conferences in Vegas this year. So there are kind of two, at least in my mental model, there are two different type of PMs. One is kind of a traditional platform PM who's still writing a lot of kind of big BRDs, 20-pager, 30-pager BRDs, and like it's much more waterfallish, where like you're trying to make sure like you are specifying your P0s, P1, P2s from the get-go, and then you're kind of working with your engineering to kind of flesh out the scope of the project, the whole delivery timelines. But in the last 1 to 2 years, some things have really evolved with many tools coming into the market, such as kind of like Cursor, Lovable, lot of things where prototyping has kind of drastically streamlined and improved. And there's a new hybrid of kind of PMs that are coming into the mix. And I'm also kind of like trying to teach that to people that I mentor, which is kind of a mix of UX researcher who's doing their research, a UX designer who's designing these systems and kind of prototyping. As a PM, you're kind of marching, giving instructions of like what needs to be included, what customer problem are you trying to solve for, and then they're also your BIEs and also your engineers. So like all of this combined is kind of now a hybrid version of an AI PM where you're doing the research quickly, you're designing systems quickly. As a PM, you're kind of marching through things and then you're developing prototypes, pushing them in production. Then you're experimenting or analyzing the data. You're being the BIE, business analyst, or business intelligence engineer. And kind of now there's a hybrid model of all these job functions coming into the mix and forming a AI PM, for a lack of a better word.
I see.
So that's kind of the evolution that I'm seeing, at least in my space, where these 4 or 5 job functions are kind of getting combined versus a traditional PM, UX designer, engineer kind of. We still need engineers, but it's more like how can you get to prototyping really fast? So that way you're not just taking an idea to an engineer or to a scientist, but rather kind of a fleshed out idea of like, hey, here is a UX or here is customer kind of problem that I'm trying to solve for by doing this. So it's much more like engineers are much more able to connect better with what the idea is and kind of articulate and can understand and visualize what you truly want to do. And then you have, as a PM, I'm able to kind of prototype and experiment really quickly. So that way I have more data in terms of what's working, what's not working, and where do I need to pivot. So I can make much more kind of informed decisions rather than waiting for these long cycles where I'm taking my requirements to engineers, they're building stuff. Then I do certain reviews to see whether they're valid or whatnot. And then you push them into production. You see whether it's working, you experiment. So it's kind of the cycle that used to be a 2 week sprint is now kind of very minimum to like 3 to 4 days. So we are seeing some efficiencies coming into the mix with like this hybrid AI PM kind of new function that's coming up in the industry in the last 1 to 2 years.
I think it's very interesting how the product manager role is changing now with AI, and now that the expectation is that the AI PM will be able to do multiple roles at the same time.
I
I'm
would
still
not
trying.
say that the PM should be able to do multiple roles at the same time, but it's more kind of which phase of the product that you're in. If it's in the discovery phase, you should be able to do all of these job functions, but you still need designers because as a PM, you're not never going to be able to design a fully fledged design that your system wants, like, or your vision is, right? So you still need these job functions, but it's more the discovery and kind of production time that you're saving for your team and kind of providing that clarity based on data rather than just a certain hypothesis.
One of the things that I noticed with AI is that there's a lot of hype about AI, and I've been trying to figure out how much is hype, how much is real, right? And I think that vibe coding, it's a great tool for product managers to be able to build prototypes, right? But I feel that that code cannot be implemented into production environment, in particularly enterprise projects, right? Maybe if you're in a startup and you have a clean state, you're starting to write code, maybe, but that's a very specific use case. But most of the cases are product managers that are on a mature project, on a mature code base, right? And um, I feel that vibe coding and building prototypes should not be considered to be included into the production, right?
Yeah. That's what I keep saying. Not yet. Hopefully in the next
Not yet.
2 to 5
Yes.
years, we are there.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually add not yet because probably by the time this episode is published, it's going to be there.
Yeah.
Maybe
Sora
not,
3
but
might come out.
it's improving very fast. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. How much is hype? How much is real, right? Yeah. And, but I can see how as a PM having a lot of experience using AI allows you to do the initial work of all these other roles, right? Would that be a first statement?
Yeah. So like the job function of a PM is still the same. You're the advocate of the customer, right? You're kind of
Right.
defining what needs to be done and why it needs to be done. So like that job definition just doesn't change. What's changing is the way we do things and kind of bringing in the efficiencies. So again, like all these frameworks of waterfall previously came in because you had these hardwares that needed to be shipped. They were all one way door kind of shipments where you put in a requirement like, hey, a mouse needs to go from X to Y if a person does X, right? And you build millions of dollars, millions of copies and then ship it. So there was no feedback loop that was coming in, and you had to probably wait like a month or two to get like customer feedback and whatnot. And then you had to kind of make improvements to the second iteration of your hardware. And then came the online kind of the whole website, A/B testing and product management, where like the feedback loop was much faster. So you can kind of do A/B testing really quick, get data, see what works. But with AI, the speed at which we are kind of experimenting and prototyping, that's kind of getting very squished in. So the framework is still applicable of like, hey, how do we experiment? How do we build product? But just the prototyping of how quickly we can get to the prototyping space and the way we are kind of thinking about requirements is evolving.
I see. So yeah, before waterfall was kind of one shot, one kill because the cost of making changes was so high that it was worthwhile to do the prep work before, right? Then when we moved to agile, it was because the cost of changes was very small, right? So we could do multiple changes even throughout the day, and it has little to no cost, right?
I keep saying this, like, imagine when Amazon released their one click buy option, right? Like, the speed to market was kind of the moat, right? Like, hey, like, let's launch this and get it patented so nobody can use it. But now, the way things are evolving is like, if let's say your moat is first to market, you're going to fail because essentially you're doing the research and R&D for your competitors of like what's working, what's not. Because the replication of technology is so easy these days because I can just go to like take a screenshot and go to any of the LLMs and say, hey, write a code for this, right? Speed to market is not the moat anymore. It's like how fast you learn from the experimentation is what the moat is these days. So it's not like just pushing things to production and like, hey, I've delivered this, but it's more, let's launch this, let's learn from this, and let's be the first one to learn and then improve. So it's more constant reiteration of your product that is the moat now compared to just first to market previously.
I see. And the use of AI on the product manager allows you to what allows you to do better than before?
So the way at least I use LLMs these days is mostly kind of threefold. One is more on the discovery side of like doing some research of like, hey, what data exists today versus where the gaps are. Uh, so kind of doing more discovery, more kind of diving deep, for a lack of a better word. Then using that information, getting to the prototyping phase, as I mentioned. Like for me, that has been the biggest unlock where I'm trying to say, okay, hey, like here is an idea that I have with certain bullet points, and I can quickly move to the prototyping phase of like, hey, here is what the UX looks like, or here is what the idea is. So you can more substantially visualize what the idea is. And then the third thing is kind of streamlining the writing, because at Amazon, we have a very document heavy culture. We write about everything. We have 6-pager, 3-pagers. So we have a lot of internal systems that I kind of use to quickly get something on paper so that way I can share it across my stakeholders and get their kind of feedback in. Previously, it would take me a month or 2 months to kind of just flesh out the idea, get it in a shape where I can get the document in a shape where I can get feedback from people. But now, like within a week, I can kind of bring a prototype and a document in front of them and get some feedback quickly. So the 3 ways I'm using is more discovery, more prototyping, and more kind of documentation and more kind of aligned driving with LLMs.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see how that will help you a lot on your role. Will allow you to do a little bit of the other roles that you mentioned before, and also will allow you to compete on this continuous on this race of continuous improvement.
Correct.
With the competition. Interesting. If you were going to advise an aspiring product manager today, what career frameworks, habits, or recommendations in general would you give them?
And like I'll try to tie this to kind of the evolution of AI product managers. So the framework, at least what I use, is you always think big. You always think in terms of where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. You start small. You think about, okay, what I clearly know where I need to be in the next 3 to 5 years, but where do I start? So start very small. Take up one customer problem, one tech that needs to be solved, and then kind of learn fast. As I mentioned, the moat is more like how do you learn faster to build the best product that your customer needs. What I have understood or kind of learned in the last 6 years being with Amazon is you need to write everything down. So you always, like, we have this document called PRFAQ, which is essentially a vision document. So you always start with a press release on when I launch this product, what this product will look like. So that it provides you clarity of, like, once you start writing down, you get clarity of what the product is, what problem are you solving, where you need to be, and how you need to get there. So write everything down is very critical for like aspiring PMs. Build intuition with data. So don't wait for like everything needs to be kind of like, hey, I need X data to make this perfect, or like I'm waiting on some research from my research team. Just start building products with intuitions. Use data as kind of a guiding principle of like, okay, here is slight directional data that I can use to build, to get started. And as you build, as you prototype, as you experiment, you start getting more data that will kind of um, build better intuition in the future. I do recommend reading Working Backwards. It's a book that talks about how you think about vision and how like you work backwards from a customer problem. One of the habits that I would say is like always build a mini POC before committing to a full roadmap. Traditionally, PMs are known to kind of formulate an entire roadmap of their product by quarter, by year. But what I'm seeing in the last 1 to 2 years, what has changed is like there are many proof of concept that are coming up, and then based on how they scale, how they perform, then you start figuring out, okay, what's my next iteration or what's the next version. So from a roadmap, now we need to get to versioning rather than kind of formulating an entire roadmap. So at least that's what kind of my 2 cents would be to the new PMs. Don't think about roadmap, think about versioning of your product.
Amazing. So you've been granted multiple patents, right? Can you walk us through one that excites you the most?
So I have, last I checked, I had 7 approved patents, and a few of them are pending. And the ones that are approved are mostly around virtual product placement or kind of the non-interruptive ad formats or long form scene understanding or video understanding that I spoke about earlier. And there are few pending around generative AI and kind of like some of the newer stuff that we're working on. But one patent that is really close to my heart is the overarching patent of virtual product placement. So what it does is, like, if people have time or are interested, should kind of go and read this virtual product placement patent, which kind of shows the mental model of how a product needs to be built. So it talks about not where we are today, but where we need to be in the future. So it kind of drives an overarching technical design of like, hey, if I were to do virtual product placement or non-interruptive ad formats, how do I go about building things to where we are, where we need to be? So it talks about how like everything is seamlessly inserted, how everything is pixel to pixel perfect. How do we do audio to video? It kind of has various components. So that particular is very close to my heart because it just kind of shows like the think big aspect of like, hey, let's outline how this tech needs to be built, what are the key pillars that needs to be part of this, and then slowly and steadily start working toward building these components together.
Amazing. So what led you to filing these patents? How did you identify the problem and what drew you to create the patents?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I was working on this long form video understanding platform, and and this was during COVID time, so we had a lot of spike in our viewership, and we were trying to see, okay, how do we as a team monetize our videos, movies and series combined? So this, like, we were brainstorming with my engineering team, and suddenly the idea came of like, hey, if I can understand a video of what's going on in a scene, why can't I insert brands and product? Because I have all the context that is needed for it to be inserted. And product placement isn't new. Product placement has existed for over 100 years. We were just trying to think about digitalization of product placement, right? So think like there's an empty space behind you, Federico. Imagine if I were to paste a Coca-Cola poster, and for every view that this podcast get, Coca-Cola has to pay you X dollar of premium, right? Wouldn't that be nice? So that's the conception of the idea that came from, and we're like, hey, everyone's going to be excited. It's a win-win-win, because content providers, content creators that are creating the content will be excited to get additional revenue streams, so that way they can make more better content. B, for the viewers, everyone hates interruption during a movie or a series. So it's a way of like non-interruptive ads, because you still need money to make content, right? So it's a way of monetizing content without interrupting your viewing experience. And then for Amazon and for our business, it was another revenue stream that would help us make more better content for our viewers, right? So it was a win-win-win situation for all these three stakeholders, and also for advertisers, right? Because let's say if I'm engaged in the content, people are much more likely to notice a brand rather than tune out when there's an ad break, right? So mostly if there's an ad break, I'll just go grab a water or go use the restroom. Versus if I'm engaged in a movie, I'm watching a Coca-Cola poster right behind Federico because I'm so engaged.
Right. When the ad starts, we kind of disconnect and do something else, right?
Correct. Or you're on your cell phone, you're on your second screen, or you're talking to your partner if you're watching with someone.
I remember when we used to watch TV and we had the ads and we would run to the bathroom or the fridge to get some food, and we prepare something quickly, and we would just, hear when the announcement of the TV show was starting again and rushing in. We don't want to lose any moment, right? Because we didn't have the opportunity to pause like now we have with Netflix, right? So it's something that my son doesn't know about. For him, it's normal to pause the TV, right?
Yeah. And like even with the streaming kind of services coming into the mix, now every streaming service have an ad tier, right? And there's only so much levers that these ad supported tiers have, that at the end of the day, I can only keep increasing the ad load. So instead of seeing 2-minute ads, now you'll see 3 minutes ad, because they got to make more revenue, right? So this is one way of like monetizing your content without adding ad load on your customers or your viewers.
Right. And that's the thing, when you can pause the movie or the TV show, the ads become much more relevant, because now people know that, well, if I miss, I can go back a little bit, right? Or I can, so it's easier to disconnect from the ads, right? Whereas if it's within the movie or TV show, then you're more eager to watch it. Yeah, I can see that happening.
They're more immersive, more native, not like to the content,
Right.
more like non-interruptive. So it's like you're not tuning out.
Right. I remember a movie that the character was drinking Coke, and then it was released on the cinemas, and then when it was released on I don't think it was VHS, it was DVDs probably, but when it was launched for rental, they changed the Coke to another brand, because they got another brand was able to pay a lower premium, because it was it was on the rental movies, right? Lower audience, I guess. And then further down the road, when it went to the to the streaming platforms, they changed it to an iced tea company that I don't remember the name now, and it's not relevant. But this idea of that, now the cost of that product placement was much lower, right? So then this other company was able to get in, and the producer were able to get the benefit of product placement 3 times, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
Now imagine like if I were to say, like, for people watching this podcast, on East Coast get to see Coca-Cola versus on West Coast get to see Pepsi, right? So that's level of kind of personalization and targeting that you can bring in if these are digitally kind of augmented on the screen.
Amazing. So you saw that problem, that led you to, or opportunity, if you like, led you to file the patents.
So this is where I think the role of kind of creativity comes into the picture of like anytime you're thinking about publishing a patent, it's more like understanding the tech feasibility and a product storytelling. So the product storytelling was like, hey, the brands had a pain point, advertisers had pain points where they were the creatives were fatigued, the costs were rising, customers didn't really enjoy interruption in their viewing experience, and with technology coming into the mixture of like, hey, now I can understand context of every scene. Now I need to streamline a bunch of other stuff of like, hey, where the ad creative will come in. Let's say I need a Coca-Cola can to be placed. So I need to work with the advertisers to get the Coke can. Now, how do I insert them seamlessly in the stream? So there's a lot of research and development that had to go in, but we had an idea of like what needed to be done. So this is where like we were like, hey, let's file a patent so that way, and like we were of course partnering with our science and engineering team. They were the kind of people who were in the driving seat. But at least as a product manager, I was able to articulate what the vision is and where we needed to go. And that was kind of the foundation of this patent. Where like, hey, what are the building blocks that we need to build? How do they kind of connect and why do they matter? So like it's more like creative storytelling of like, hey, what my product is, what do I need to build, how do they all connect, and let the engineers and kind of the science people do their work. But as long as you provided that clarity, it's easy for kind of the product to be patented easily rather than kind of just juggling and figuring out, okay, what do I get patent versus not?
Right.
And I
Yes.
made a joke recently where like people were asking like, hey, I'm interested in filing a patent. How do I go about this? So I kind of joked and said, filing a patent is like a stand up comedy. You say something wild and crazy, and then you just try to justify with your science and engineering team before the lawyers cut you off. So it's like you're outlining everything. You're working with your science and engineering, and the lawyers will say, okay, hey, let's gotta stop this. And this is what the patent looks like. So that was kind of one of the jokes that I recently had.
I love it. Yes. I mean, as far as I understand, I mean, and this is probably a very simplistic version, but the way I understand patent is, whoever said it first wins, right? So, you have to basically prove that nobody else came up with this idea, right? And then the patent is yours, right? And that could mean a lot, could mean anything, could mean nothing, right? It depends on what the idea is about, right? But I find that process interesting, right? And there are patents that are wild and crazy, and their patents has been very useful to the humanity. So I find that we become we the creative become victims of the bureaucrats, right? So yeah, but I see the value of the patents because that allows you to have a solid foundation to build something upon it.
Yeah. And also on a personal note, like it helps you kind of build or establish your legacy, right?
Right.
What you got to be named for. For example, like there are companies such as Tesla, they don't believe in kind of closed patents. All their patents are public, anyone can use it, but it's more kind of the legacy that they're trying to build with the people that are filing for those patents.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like a nice way of saying kudos, like good job.
Right. It's an open patent kind of thing, right?
Correct.
Because they support the use of the ideas. Yeah. Yeah. They actually recently they published a patent where they talk about building the card, assembling the card differently than other companies, right? So in traditional companies, they put a chassis and then they put everything together on top of this. But here, basically, they build part of the car and then they assemble a part of the card and then they weld them together, and that kind of becomes a car, right? So they're pre-painted, they are customized to the car that is on the line, And that's a different way to build cars, right? So I see the value of doing those type of patents. Right? So what advice would you give somebody that it's thinking about patenting their idea, pursuing a patent, basically? How do you balance that, creativity until the moment you realize, okay, I should start patenting this idea?
So the way at least I do think about patents is you need to write down every what if that comes to your brain, which is like, okay, if I were to do this, what if this happens? So you're listing down all the what if scenarios and don't be limiting. So don't kind of close down what if like this doesn't work. Don't close down that idea. Write it down. Then you kind of think about how do you solve that particular thing, or like what the kind of the tech components or vision needs to be to in order for you to solve that. And then I can't emphasize enough, like start partnering with the legal as soon as possible, as soon as like you have this idea and like you have a kind of a sort of a blueprint of what you want to do, because they do this for a living. They know like what to extract out of you. So it's always good to kind of partner with legal from the get-go. And then treat it like product discovery. There are going to be many dead ends of like, hey, like what if I were to do this and this doesn't work? Okay. So like think about like you're doing a product discovery while you're writing a patent. So it's more also like helps you kind of define what the product is, define what components you need to build. So a lot of discovery that goes in probably 40-50% of our time during the product discovery. Treat it as such. Lot of dead ends, but you'll find some gems that will come out of it, that will not only help you file the patent and get it approved, but also help with your product kind of product launches, product development.
Right. And how soon do you think they should pursue the patent? Because everybody can have a great idea, but it's the execution and the validation that actually makes it an amazing idea.
So this is where the product storytelling and the tech feasibility have to kind of come together, right? It's not like I have this wild idea that I'm going to solve for cancer. There has to be kind of some tech feasibility of like what components are needed in order for me to solve X, and what exists today versus where my idea needs to come in to help kind of bridge the gap. So it's like you need to have a blueprint of like what the tech feasibility is today and where I need to be, plus what problem am I solving and what components do I need in order for me to solve that problem. So it's not
Right.
like you have a wild idea, let's get that patent, versus like having a realistic tech feasibility with the product storytelling is very critical to getting a patent approved.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I use a rudimentary example, but yes, I agree with you. It has to be something that you already proved, that you already has been able to test, validate, shape. And the other thing the other value that I see on the patent is that if you have a good idea, the scrutiny of going through, challenging that idea, right? Validating it with, real use case, right?
And this is where partnering with lawyers from the get-go helps, because they can do discovery of like whether there are similar patterns that were kind of approved or filed. So that way they can stop you from kind of going into the rabbit hole and spending a lot of time. Plus also they know what to extract out of you and help you file a patent in a way like there's more um, kind of chances of getting approved.
Right. Right. Yes, I agree. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that a good idea will be able to survive the scrutiny and the challenge of any challenge that you could put up to it, right? That makes it a great idea, right? And basically you can have an idea and then you shape it based on the technical implementation, the legal feedback that you're from the legal team you're going to get, adapt the idea until it can survive. It's not an attack, but the challenge, and the scrutiny from any point of view. Then you have a solid idea that becomes a patent.
I think there's a saying where all good ideas are good products until you test and validate, and then it becomes a great product.
Amazing. changing topics, do you follow a specific framework when making high-stake product decisions?
So there are like a few things, like in terms of frameworks, and I'm probably someday going to write a book about this. But if you're, let's say, an aspiring product manager, depending upon where you are in your product journey or like your product career, these frameworks evolve. They also evolve what kind of product are you trying to build, whether it's a kind of a platform product, whether it's a customer experience product versus it's a new kind of business line you're building for the company, or like if you're kind of working for a startup. So the framework, there's no static framework as such. There are various frameworks that are applicable across like how mature you are in your product journey, where you are, what kind of product you're building, what kind of like product personality you have. So for an inspiring product manager, I always say like Amazon's working backwards is an amazing way to kind of start building products, which is we start with a PR FAQ, which is you're outlining like a narrative clarity of like, hey, where do I need to, what is this product? Where do I need to go? What exists today? What is the business case? What does the customer problem looks like? Is it worth solving? So there are a lot of these questions that get answered with Amazon's working backwards, and it's not proprietary to Amazon. Anyone can use it. It's just a great tool that thankfully Jeff Bezos has kind of made public, where anyone can come who's aspiring to be a PM or like is a PM that is trying to solve a problem can use. So working backwards is a great product framework for product managers, which provides kind of narrative clarity and also simulation of like, hey, what if I were to solve this? What happens then? And kind of what are the other steps we need to do? Then you need to pair that with experimentation framework of like A/B testing, kind of getting some research or surveys done with your customers based on like what product you're building. We have this joke at Amazon that if you don't have a PR, your idea is just a tweet. So your don't just tweet, get me a PR FAQ. At least that's what I tell my team and kind of my stakeholders. Don't just come to me with like, hey, here is a grand idea in like one word or like one sentence or one paragraph. Like at least flesh out a PR FAQ, because it's a great mechanism for product managers to challenge their own ideas and also flesh their own ideas thoroughly. Like working backwards is a great framework for product managers. But there are various different frameworks, as I mentioned, like that are applicable across like all these different kind of variables that we deal with day to day.
Yeah, because otherwise it's daydreaming, right? If they give you an idea, a very small idea that haven't been documented, haven't been like put down in writing, and it's it's a dream, right? So, but when they put it in a PR, then it becomes a much more mature idea, right? And that's the other thing. It becomes a fixed object, right? A fixed target. Versus if it's in the air, then if it's in my mind and I tell it to you, every time I tell you, it's going to be different, right?
It's open to interpretation versus when you
Right.
start writing, it's much more like there, which is like, hey, we can all align on this particular line that you've written versus like an abstract idea that you might have a different opinion or an idea about versus me.
Amazing. So talking about AI beyond ads, what new applications of AI excite you the most, in the near future?
So agentic AI is, I think, taking off pretty drastically. So agentic AI products, because it's just not prediction. You're not predicting what the viewer or the customer is going to do, but it's acting across workflows. There are many applications in healthcare, education, compliance automation. From a creative streaming point of view, there are like video editing, dubbing applications of AI that are going to come into the mix, where a bunch of people or streaming services have already started experimenting. When you're watching, there's a lot of craze these days with Korean dramas, K-pop dramas and K-pop songs. So a lot of times the lip sync of the character, although the subtitles and the audio are kind of dubbed in various languages, the lips still move in the Korean language. So there are a lot of like AI automation that is coming in, where even your lips of the characters can be custom to the language that it is dubbed in. So there are a lot of like these applications in the streaming space, a lot of healthcare thing. beyond kind of ads and beyond kind of good customer experience, AI is going to be a co-pilot that reduces time to decisions, or like kind of brings in the efficiency across these, like across our day-to-day kind of jobs, not just as a PM, but like it's across, like, hey, how do I streamline my day-to-day and bring in efficiencies where I'm doing a lot of repetitive tasks or things that can be kind of that exists somewhere, but it's just taking me time to kind of go discover. Recently, I was experimenting with Comet 2 browser. It's an amazing kind of browser, which is, if I'm like, there was a task that I have to do repetitively. It takes me 2 hours every week. And I just went into Comet and said, hey, this is the task that I need to do. I'm doing this weekly. Can you help automate? And it kind of just ran, like, just based on this prompt, it did the task and created a procedure that is repeated every week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So AI is, for me, is more co-pilot, for a lack of a better word, but like it's going to streamline and bring efficiencies in everyone's life. So it's not just the application when it comes to like various organization, various departments, but it's across, like, as a human, kind of a tool that humans can utilize and bring efficiencies in their kind of day-to-day life. I'm more excited about kind of that application of AI.
Amazing. Amazing. Awesome. So we're running out of time, but first, I truly appreciate, Yash, you joining us today. I think we learned a lot about patents, about ads, product placement, your experience as product managers. It's been amazing. So before we wrap it up, do you have any final remarks that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, so I'll tell all the product managers that are listening in that don't be scared of AI, that AI is going to take your job. Be scared of the PM who knows how to use AI better than you. So that's kind of my parting word. So AI adoption is very critical for PMs, whether kind of aspiring PMs or PMs who are mature. AI adoption, if not done right, then you should be scared.
Thank you, Yash, for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Federico.